So we'll start Schoengrabern. We see that really nice counter of Marshal Murat, the French leader. Look at those fine qualities he has for commanding his troops. Oh, wait a minute. Marshal Murat is not used in scenario 1, and there's only one scenario. Just goes to show, kids, read the instructions before beginning the work. I could have saved myself 5 minutes and not constructed that counter. It's pretty to look at, so we got it. We're keeping it. We're back to the original setup here. We'll start with the movement phase here shortly. So in the 1600 turn, the French get 2 sets of reinforcements. The 1st and 2nd Grenadiers enter on this road. They get to enter immediately, but every other reinforcement has to roll a die and pass a dice roll of 1 in order to enter. Each subsequent turn they don't enter, they add 1 to that dice roll, or subtract 1, I guess, until they can enter. So first turn a 1, second turn have to roll a 2, third turn a 3, and so on. So we will roll for the 9th and 10th Cavalry there. And we roll a 2 and a 3 respectively, so they don't enter this turn. I'm going to pop them on the turn track to show that they will try again next turn. Now this 1st and 2nd Grenadiers can enter immediately on that road. Meanwhile, we have the 5th Grenadiers here in the town, and they are going to move across and enter the vineyard. I'm going to change them into skirmish order in order to maximize their frontage and their defense. Basically, they're going to try to screen the arrival of the French. So, moving across the stream is +1. We will move here. We will change into skirmish order and then enter the vineyard. This is General Oudinot. He is going to change into skirmish order, cross the stream, enter the vineyard. The vineyard takes 2 movement points, so we moved 1 more, should get us basically to the end of our movement allowance. So he's facing potentially a lot of Russian troops there, or maybe not, he doesn't know, because the deployments are obscured. Now we're going to move each of these battalions in. I tend to play half hexes, so everybody can deploy in skirmish order, these Grenadiers. So I'm going to flip them to skirmish order, and then move 1 more into the town and in that clear area. So these guys are marching in column, so we'll add up. This is actually the 2nd movement point. And we'll deploy them into skirmish order for the last movement point. So they have a bit of a skirmish line to the east of the town, and 1 to the north. And these last 2 battalions will march in. And we do have the artillery over here. I want to leave them on the hill, but it might be useful to march some of this artillery around to the other side of the town and possibly up the center here. They aren't very much help in the vineyard, except on that hill, but eventually we're going to get through that vineyard, so we want to have our artillery kind of poised and ready. So town costs 3, or the village here. I'm just going to move those guys 2 hexes. And I think I'll leave that guy limbered right there. So that should conclude our movement portion of the turn. Move forward into defensive fire. This is where it gets a little cloudy to me in the Schoengrabern. In Austerlitz, the obscured units, be they real or not, can make 1-to-1 fire attacks, even the completely dummy counters. This game is kind of quiet on that, but I like that idea. It adds to the illusion that the French were stymied by what they were seeing in front of them. So I'm going to allow 1-to-1 attacks in each of these dummy or obscured stacks. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 dice rolls just to see what happens. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We'll make that rolled a 54, which would be an increment loss. It's probably a little penal, but I think the Russians need a little bit of help in this game. Now we have 2 more fires, and both low numbers, so nobody hit anything there. The French can fire each of these skirmishers. So this 6 increments with a 3 fire multiple is going to fire on those guys in the vineyard. We roll a very low number, so it's not worth the bother to even figure out what the odds are. We'll go ahead and fire on this, leaving that guy alone because we're going to have such low odds. Roll the 62. So that is likely a hit, yeah, because we have 4 increments firing on probably about a 12. So that's a loss. Now, per the rules in this game, that's a real unit, but he actually doesn't. Wait a minute. I think the rules in this game are once you move adjacent, you discover. Which I think the Austerlitz rules are better. We're going to say once you melee or cause a casualty, you discover the hidden unit. I just think that feels more true. It's too easy to reveal someone just by moving next to them, especially if they're truly a dummy. So we have 1 more unit here, 5 increments with 2 targets. We're going to go ahead and hit both those targets. And when you know, we roll a 65, which would be about, I think that's a casualty, 7.5 to 12. So yeah, that's about 1 to 2, so that's a casualty. And that's a full-on dummy stack, so they're just gone. And 1 more roll, and a fairly low roll, so no more casualties. So the French have completed their fire phase. Except, wait a minute, I have these excellent artillery batteries up on the hill with a view into the vineyard. So they're going to fire. We have a target here and a target there and a target there. Seems to make the most sense that they might fire on him and him. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's about the long-range shot. It's not going to be a very good shot. But at least it opens up the cannonade. Now, as we move to the assault phase, we're probably not going to undertake any assaults with our skirmishers. We're just trying to screen the arrival of the rest of our forces. And we have no rally or routed units. So that will take us to the Russian half of the phase. changing to the coalition perspective. We see far back beyond the vineyard the routed cavalry and the Russian cavalry and guns waiting. Moving forward, we can see the mass of deployed infantry in the vineyard. So the Russians, in their first turn, have seen a hole open up right here, so they'll likely try to move someone in to cover that. Otherwise, they're going to be holding pat, trying to just slow down the French. The object here is to take as many, inflict as many casualties as possible on the French and keep them in that vineyard as long as possible. Once they get out of the vineyard, the French cavalry and artillery will be pretty darn strong. It'll be up to the Russians just to turn tail and run. So we're not going to see a whole lot of charges in this game. Once they get out of the vineyard, maybe. But in the short term, there's going to be a lot of infantry slogging around. So we will look to see if we can move some infantry around in these vineyards. So it costs 2 to move into the vineyard and then 1 along the road. 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll go 1 more, 6, 7. I think we'll move 1, 2, 3 to the forward. Otherwise, I think we'll leave them where they are. They're kind of okay where they are. So we look at defensive fire for the French. Try not to knock anybody over. You see again the grenadiers here in skirmish order can fire on that location. Very low. We have more grenadiers in skirmish order. Very low numbers. It's all very low dice rolls, no impacts. And the artillery up here can't fire in their defensive fire phase. Only adjacent targets can be targeted or fired upon. So we will move to the Russian half for the turn. We're going to go ahead and give the 1-to-1 attacks just because I like that rule. And when you know it, these guys are taking a beating here. Another high roll, another casualty. That sparks a morale check. Our dice are 45, so that's more than enough for this to stand his ground in the vineyard. We have 1 more attack here. We have 2 more 1-to-1 attacks. All pretty low dice. Only that center French battalion is taking a beating at this point. Now the Russians don't really need to make any kind of assaults at this point. Keeping their positions is good enough. So we have to rally, hopefully, that Hussard regiment. And unfortunately, we roll a 15, which is not good enough. It's kind of funny. The morale of this guy is a 24, or excuse me, a 14, which I actually think is a misprint. I think their morale is 24 and their melee is 14. But either way, the rules for this guy is his morale is 12 worse for the entire scenario. Why didn't we just print the 12 worse on the counter and not make me do the math? But anyway, he remains routed. He's still 15 hexes away, so he doesn't need to move or retreat any further. And that'll do it for the 1600 turn.